Coming up on today's episode of the Home Turf Podcast, we're going to be talking about 5 things. First, Patrick Mahomes' big new contract, the NBA return to play, the MLB schedule, it's out. We're going to talk about who has the easiest, who has the hardest schedule. The MLS is returning to play this week. We're going to be talking about that. And then we're going to talk about the NHL return to play, the CBA. We're going to talk about all of that coming up on today's episode. And welcome everybody to the very first episode of the Home Turf Podcast. My name is Brad. I'll be your host throughout the entire series. It is so nice to have you here with us today. And like I said in the intro, we're going to be talking about 5 things. And the very first thing that came to my mind when I was planning this episode was, what should I talk about? And guess what? The first thing I thought was, you know what? We got to talk about that $450 million extension that Patrick Mahomes signed with the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, this contract is the biggest in sports history, and it's starting to make me think, will we see another contract like this ever? And to my opinion, I think we will, but it will not be in the sport that you're probably thinking. A lot of people probably think, it'll probably be in the NFL once the next Patrick Mahomes, the next Tom Brady, when they come in. I think it's going to be in baseball. You're going to see that next player in baseball, a Babe Ruth type or a Yogi Berra type, and they're going to come in and they're just going to light everything on fire, and you're going to see this big, massive contract. People wanting to pay the luxury tax in baseball, wanting them to pay just to get this guy signed. So I think we will see it in the MLB, in the NFL, probably as well. We're probably going to see it, but you're not going to see it for a little bit because Patrick Mahomes is such a complete NFL quarterback. He was the reason, in my mind, why the Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year. He's just so dynamic. He knows how to throw the ball. He knows when to run the ball. He just controls the game so effortlessly that I've seen from any other player in the league. You know, you look at Tom Brady and you see how well he controls the game and his offense and how well it runs. With Patrick Mahomes, though, it just looks like another level. You see Patrick Mahomes and then you see Tom Brady. To me, Patrick Mahomes is the be-all, end-all of NFL quarterbacks in today's game. In the future, what we might see is a lot of people looking at Patrick Mahomes and copying his game style, copying his game calling, copying everything. And you're going to see it, but not for a long time. Now, this also got me thinking, what about comparing it to other sports contracts throughout the different leagues? And, you got to look at the NHL. We got to look at Connor McDavid. And Connor McDavid is probably the best hockey player in the world right now. Sure, he doesn't have the record that Sidney Crosby or that Wayne Gretzky have, and that's okay. It'll come. I 100% believe that Connor McDavid will be the best player in hockey, at least in our generation. Maybe in the generations before, maybe not. But you know what? Right now, Connor McDavid is the best player in the NHL. So you look at both those contracts and you see just how crazy different they are. Now you have to remember too, when you're looking at NFL and the NHL, that the NHL has a salary cap. So you have to remember that Connor McDavid can't be signed for $450 million, although I bet you Edmonton would love to extend him for that. But right now, we could look at the 2 contracts. Let's look at Patty Mahomes. So it's a 10-year extension, $450 million, so that averages out at $45 million a year. Whereas Connor McDavid's is 8 years, $100 million, so that has a cap hit of $12.5 million per season. Now, and when you look at McDavid's contract as well, you also have to look at McDavid only gets a base salary of $1 million, and then the rest is a signing bonus. So that's pretty crazy when you think about it. Just for signing the contract, Connor McDavid gets a buttload of money just for signing the contract that Edmonton has to pay out. So really, when you look at it, Connor McDavid is only getting $1 million a year to play hockey. That's it. Like, you can look at it that way, and you can look at it like, okay, if he just signs on the dotted line, we have to give him 12 million, 13 million, 12.5 million, however many the signing bonus is, and then we're only really paying this player $1 million to play hockey throughout the year. So a lot of the money went up front, so he better produce. Now, it also got me to thinking too, when you look at, if you look back a couple weeks ago, you saw a report, at least I thought I saw a report that said if Patrick Mahomes didn't sign, you saw it and you kind of looked, it was a report by ESPN. It was that Patrick Mahomes did not want to play another game for Kansas City until the Chiefs changed their name to respect the Native American tribes. And you know what? I understood that. I agreed with him. But what happened? Is this contract like, okay, here, we're going to give you a bunch of money if you just keep quiet, where we don't want to change our name, or was it a tactic by the Chiefs saying, okay, this is where we want to go with our name change, but we need you to commit first? And looking at it, I think it's the latter. I think it's the Chiefs want to do a name change, but they need Patrick Mahomes to commit for the next season. Because if they don't commit, and if he doesn't commit to the team, then they have a problem. They have lost their franchise quarterback and their franchise star, and it's not going to be good for them. Now, if it's the first thing I said about it being just to get him to shut up and play football, I would pay that price too. But you know what? I don't believe in my heart of hearts that Kansas City would do that to a player and do that to their fans. The Chiefs need to change their name, and they need to change their name quickly. And the only way to get Mahomes to believe that is to pay a big salary. You could say, okay, we're going to do an exploratory committee like you're looking in the NFL. You're looking at the Redskins. The Redskins are doing that. So they're beginning the process, which is good to see, but you want the star player who said, I'm not going to play another game until you change your name. You have that player now committing to your team without having that problem. Because if Patrick Mahomes said, okay, I'm out until you change your name, that's a long process to do. You have to get the team owners involved, you have to get the shareholders involved, and you have to have a vote. And then you have to go through all the regulatory stuff with the NFL, and you don't want to have that. And that could waste a season or even more of Patty Mahomes, who just sits on the couch and works out, and he'll just collect, his salary that he has, and he's not playing a game of football. He's not playing another down. He's not doing anything. So you need him. Kansas City needs him to play football, and the only way he does that is with a massive extension. It is, in my mind, a perfect amount of money for the player like Patrick Mahomes, but it's also a way to say, hey, we're serious about you, we're serious about the team, we want to take your feedback, so we're going to change your name, but we need you to commit first. What can we do to make you commit? If you want to stay with the Chiefs, which we want for you to, what will we have to do to get you to change, or to get you to sign and commit? And this is the way, in my mind, in which Patrick Mahomes has committed to the Chiefs, and the Chiefs have committed to him. That's what a contract is for. But the Chiefs have committed to him. Okay, we hear you, we're going to change. And that is what I think of the Patrick Mahomes new contract. If you don't believe what I'm saying, or you disagree, or you agree, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Like our page on Facebook. Direct message us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever you get your social media, and tell me. And you know what? We'll talk about it next time, but for right now, we're going to move on. So coming up after a quick break, we're going to be talking about the NBA and its return to play. So who do I think is going to win it all after we watch the 8 seeding games and seeing who actually gets into the playoff? And then we're going to talk about an interesting idea that I think the NHL should adopt as well, and that's a bubble of the teams who aren't going to Orlando. Bubble for those teams to at least stay competitive. And I'm going to talk about why I think the NHL should do this, as well as, any other team that has a hub city or anything, like maybe even the MLS. And I'm going to talk about why I think it's a good idea. So we're going to talk about that coming up after this short break. All right, welcome back to the podcast. Now, for those of you who know, the NBA is returning to play on July 30th. Now, to go over this teams, we're just going to quickly go over, there's 22 of them. So in the Eastern Conference, we have Milwaukee, Toronto, Boston, Miami, Indiana, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Orlando, and Washington. And in the West, we have Los Angeles, Clippers and Lakers, Denver, Utah, Oklahoma City, Houston, Dallas, Memphis, Portland, New Orleans, Sacramento, San Antonio, and Phoenix. Now, for those of you who don't know, those 22 teams are going to go down to Orlando. Some of them are there now. Some of them are going to come there. Now, they're going to play 8 seeding games before the playoffs begin. So these games are going to determine who is the first seed and who's the 8th seed, who's getting in, who's not. And then once those games are done, the playoffs will begin. Now, they're going to be selected from a team's remaining regular season matchups. So teams that they would have played if the season, would have resumed. So for me, I think if I had to choose a team, let's choose a team from the East and let's choose a team from the West. If I had to choose 2 teams to make it to the final that's going to start on September 30th, I think I got to go with the Lakers, and I have to go with Milwaukee. Those are the 2 odds-on favorites for the NBA, and I'll tell you why I'll choose one of those teams. I chose both those teams. Now, Milwaukee, of course, they have Giannis. They have the best player in basketball in the East. And then when you go into the LA Lakers, you have the best player of all time in LeBron James. Now, some people might disagree and say the best player of all time is Michael Jordan. Well, again, it's with the Connor McDavid thing in the NHL. I see so much for both arguments. I see the argument for Michael Jordan and I see the argument for LeBron James. To me, LeBron James is just a hair better than Michael Jordan, just to me. And you know what? Again, if you want to disagree or if you want to tell me I'm an idiot or a moron, you can simply go anywhere of our social media pages and you can just say, hey, Brad, you're a moron. And I'll just say, you know what? Tell me why. And we'll talk about it on the next episode. But right now, I think in the Eastern Conference, you're going to see a Milwaukee-Toronto final in the Eastern Conference. And in the West, I think you're going to see a battle of LA. You're going to see the Clippers, who could upset the Lakers, in my opinion. You're going to see those teams in the conference final for the Western Conference. So we've got to who I think is going to win. Now, I'd like to know who you think is going to win, or who you think is going to be a team that's going to surprise everybody. Is a team like Orlando going to sneak in and say, okay, hey, we're going to play and we're going to win. We're going to go all the way. If you think that, again, get in contact with us. You can also email us at thehometurfpodcast@gmail.com. You're more than welcome to do that as well. And we'll accept any form of social media contact. So, tell us and we'll talk about it next time. But right now, we're going to switch to the bubble of the non-playoff teams. So these are the teams that aren't going to Orlando. These are the teams that, they won maybe 11, 12 games all basketball season. So these teams are going to go to Chicago. And these teams are just going to play scrimmage games or just going to play games to stay competitive. Now, I absolutely love that idea, and here's why. You have that competitiveness that everyone else is getting in the form of going after championship, but then you also have these guys who are going to be sitting down and waiting for basketball to start, presumably not until Christmas of this year or even later. That's a long time not playing basketball. So these guys are going to be able to go play competitive basketball, have practices, have everything else. And guess what? They're going to be able to fine tune their skills or to work on their game or just, to just keep everything the same, just to make sure that their game doesn't slip. And so this, I think, is just a fantastic idea from Adam Silver. I think it's just top notch. And I think it should be adopted by the NHL because, again, you're going to have players and teams. They're going to be sitting down. They've been sitting since March. And they're going to be sitting down and waiting till December. That is 9 months of sitting down. Yes, you can practice. Yes, you can do all the other stuff. But there's nothing like a real game. So, in my opinion, this should be adopted by the NHL to get those teams like Ottawa, like Detroit, like LA, like Buffalo. All those teams should be able to go and play professionally, just play against each other. No one's going to come to the games. That's fine. No one's like, people may watch it on TV just to watch it on TV, even if there's no TV, even if they're just there to play games. Let them play the games and let them fine tune their skills. These prospects that Ottawa has, that LA have, that the New Jersey Devils have, all these prospects that these teams have need to develop. And if they sit down and do nothing or just practice and go to the gym, practice, you'll get there. But you need to apply it to a real game setting. And this will be able to help with that. And so I think what the NBA have done has just been fantastic. Again, if you disagree, tell me. I want to hear the passionate sports fans tell me I'm a moron, or tell me, hey, you know what? I never really thought of it that way. I really like that idea. But you know what? It's just, I just think it's amazing. And you know what? When the MLS returns, and we're going to talk about that later coming up, but when the MLS returns and we have teams who have been, let's say the teams that don't get past the group stage in the MLS, let's just, let them play. Let them just have fun. You see it in the World Cup. You see, third place games, fourth place games. Let's see what like you do in the Olympics. When a team gets eliminated or a country gets eliminated from competition, let them play for fifth or sixth place, 5-6 games. That way, hey, they can still play. They'll have a couple more games of competitive style, just that way, they're playing. They're not just wasting their time. You could get a team out of the MLS that plays those 3 group games, then nothing. And you went to Orlando just for like 3 games. That's nothing. So I think, it's a great idea. It's a fantastic idea, in my opinion, and it should be adopted by other leagues. And, if it isn't, well, that's up to them. But I think that's a grave mistake because you're going to lose a lot of interest from players, and players may not even have the same, just the same skill level they used to have, just because, or it's going to take a while for them to get back just because they've been sitting down, or they've been they're working out in the gym, but they haven't played a professional game of hockey in 9 months. That's a lot when you think about it. No off season, that's 3 times the off season what it normally is. If you lose in April, you go to September, that's about 4 months. It's not that bad. Or 5 months, sorry. Stupid math. But 5 months of not playing. Even then, that's almost double what players expect. And if COVID hits and COVID has a second wave, then you may not see any hockey or anything until January or February. So you're going to see this. And if you get players back to playing, even if they're not playing for anything, or to let them play for just like a little cup, or, just to say, hey, we're the best of the worst teams that aren't playing, just to have some competitiveness to it. And, again, you don't have to have any TV or anything like that, but, let them play. That's, just let them play. And I just think it's a fantastic idea. And, again, if you disagree, let me know. But, we're it's just so brilliant. I don't see anything wrong with it. Yeah, you could say, COVID testing and people could get sick for, if the games don't mean anything, then why risk the players? Yes, I understand that, but if I was a player, I would be okay with that. So coming up next, we're going to be talking about the MLB schedule release. Who has the easiest schedule in my opinion? Who has the hardest schedule in my opinion? We're going to talk about key dates and also what are we going to see this year from the MLB? Hint, there's no All-Star game. We'll be talking about that coming up next. So as some of you may know, the MLB released its schedule just a couple days ago for all MLB teams. And today we're going to go over who I think has the easiest schedules. We're going to talk about 3 teams who have the easiest schedule and then 3 teams who have the hardest schedule. So we're going to start with the easiest schedule first because, like anything, the easier it is, the easier it just makes everything go better. So the first team that has the easiest schedule, and it's not because of who they're playing or where they're playing, it's just the team overall. And that team is New York, the Yankees. They have the best team arguably in baseball. Their starting 5 is just impeccable. Their bullpen is amazing. Their power, their contact. The only thing that could maybe hurt this team this year is their fielding. Just, I don't know, sometimes I feel that they have a little bit of problems with their fielding, but to be honest, it'll make up. Like everything else will be able to make up for their fielding errors if they have any this year. So just because of how good they are, it makes their schedule look real easy. Now, it's not just the team as a whole, it's also the fact of where they're playing to a small part. You have in the AL East 3 teams at least who aren't going to really factor into it this year. You're going to have Baltimore, who lost over 100 games last year. You're going to have Boston because they're not going to have the quality pitching. They don't have David Price and they don't have Chris Sale this year. And then you have the Toronto Blue Jays, who are getting better, but they're still going to be a little bit behind. They did get a lot better than last year, but they're still not going to make a big indent. So the only team in their division that may give them trouble is Tampa Bay, and they don't play Tampa Bay that much this year. And then you look at who else are they playing, what other division are they playing against? That's the National League East. Now, the National League East has some good teams, Philadelphia, Washington, and New York, the Mets in the Subway Series. But then you have to think, New York, the Yankees are just going to overpower any team they play against. Any team they play against, they're just going to overpower them. They might lose a couple games here and there, but out of a 60-game season, don't be surprised if they win at least 40. Now, second team was the easiest schedule. It's going to be the LA Dodgers. The LA Dodgers, just because they have they have one of the best teams in baseball as well. Arguably the best team in the NL. So, again, it's their team, but it's also who they're playing against. And the Dodgers, they have a little bit of a challenge because they are going to be playing with the AL West. But aside from Houston and Oakland, the AL West is not going to amount to much. Yes, Mike Trout and the LA Angels, they may surprise a couple people, but their team still has a couple holes. And if Shohei Ohtani can pitch well and lead the rotation, then the Angels will do well. But that's for a story for another day. Now, the NL West, LA has had every single team's number in that division for years. If you look at over the past couple of years of baseball, the Dodgers have had the best record against their own division. So to me, it's a no-brainer that LA has one of the easiest schedules, again, just by where they are. Now, the third and final one, again, it has to do with geography. Everything in this part of the show has to do with geography. And that team is the Minnesota Twins, based on just their division, because who is in their division? You got to look. So we'll start with the 2 really teams that aren't going to factor much this year. That's going to be Kansas City Royals and the Detroit Tigers. Yes, the Tigers got probably one of the best young players in baseball in Spencer Torkelson, but if he plays this year, he's going to be amazing. You have to watch him, but they're not really going to factor a whole lot. The other two teams, Cleveland and Chicago, yeah, they could maybe give the Twins a bit of a scare, but I don't think Minnesota, with their elite pitching, their great bullpen, and their pound for pound offense is very similar to the Yankees. The Yankees have a much better edge in the other categories, but their hitting is pretty close to the Yankees. But again, it's where they are. So again, then you have to look at the NL Central, and those have some tough teams. You got Chicago, you've got St. Louis, you've got Pittsburgh, who probably won't give you too much of a hassle, but you have those teams. And for Minnesota, that may be a challenge, but like I said, their offensive power is just going to carry them through the season. Another team that you could see win about 35 to 40 games in a 60-game season. Now, we've gone through the easiest. Now we got to go through the hardest. And the hardest, I mentioned them earlier, one of the teams that have the hardest schedule is the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays have one of the hardest schedules out of 60 games because of, again, where they are. Everything is just geography. So who do they open up against? Tampa Bay. Who do they go home against? Washington, the defending World Series champions. That's a hard start for a season. And then at the end of the season, 13 of their last 20 games are against the Yankees, and that's not good. So for a team that wasn't projected to make a big splash this year, but to be better, it's going to be hard for people to see it because of who they're facing, and basically, just 60 games, it's just a small sample size, but for a team like Toronto, it could be beneficial if they can play. Just because they have one of the hardest schedules doesn't mean they can make a good run in the season and go into the playoffs and do well. Now, the second team that has another hard schedule, I mentioned them earlier again, is the Mets. And again, it's just geography. But if their starting rotation of Syndergaard, DeGrom, and Stroman, those top three, if they can carry them along with Pete Alonso, I think the Mets have a good shot at making the playoffs and potentially going a round or two, depending on who they get placed up against. Now, they also have Philadelphia in their division, who, as most of you know, Bryce Harper's on that team, and then, again, the Nats. The only team that's really not going to factor in with them this year are the Baltimore Orioles and the Miami Marlins. And again, to go on just go back to Toronto for a second. Toronto and New York, one thing they have in common is they're not very good against their own division. They've had some trouble, especially Toronto, the past couple of years with their own division. Actually, as far as I remember, Toronto has had a very tough time with its own division. Now, third, and the final team that has the hardest schedule, one of them, is Texas. And again, it's geography, but there's also something different about where they are. Texas is matched up with the AL in their AL West division and the NL West. And like I said, the NL West is just run by the Dodgers, but there are some good teams in the NL West. You also have the Diamondbacks, who could play spoiler, and you also have San Diego, who also could, I think a lot of people underrate them. They're a lot better than what some people say. Now, again, with the AL West, you have Houston and you have Oakland. Seattle, they're not going to factor in much. And the Angels, they're going to be a pretty good team, but they're not at the top tier as Oakland and Houston and LA. Now, the thing about Texas too, the AL West, it's pretty good. Like, it's pretty close along the Pacific Ocean. So you have all those California teams. Colorado is a neighboring state of California. And, you have all those teams. Seattle, again, everyone's in that vicinity. Now, I read on Sports Illustrated, credit to Sports Illustrated, that the Texas Rangers, out of all the teams this year, have to travel the furthest. They have to travel the most. They have to travel over, I think it was 14,000 miles, which is a lot in a 60-game period. So credit to Sports Illustrated for finding that out. And, I just feel bad for Texas because they're an up-and-coming team. Probably in a 162 wouldn't make much of a splash, but, it's pretty hard when you have to travel the most out of any team. So just a quick recap of who's easiest, who's hardest. Easiest, definitely New York, Dodgers, and the Minnesota Twins. And then the hardest are the Blue Jays, Texas Rangers, and the New York Mets. Now, once the schedules are done and talked about, we have a couple key dates. So as some of you may know, there's no All-Star game this year. It was pushed back to 2022 because they've already picked a 2021 All-Star game, and that's in Atlanta for next year. Now, I don't really like the All-Star game anymore. I was personally a big fan of when it decided home field advantage in the World Series. Just it brought a little bit of competitiveness to the game, and it was unique in that way that no other All-Star game did that. But I understand why they did it, and I'm past that. Now, key dates are, so the season's going to begin July 24th or 25th, basically. They're going to have they're going to have 100th anniversary of the Negro Leagues, which I think is just fantastic. They're going to also be having a Field of Dreams series, again, with the St. Louis Cardinals and I believe the Chicago White Sox. So that's going to be fun as well. And then they also have the trade deadline. Now, you think in a 60-game season, there wouldn't be a trade deadline, but guess what? There is, and it's August 31st. So it's going to be hard for teams, though, to be active during that time because it's just a small sample size. So I don't think they should really have a trade deadline, but they've included that, and that's August 31st. And then the end of the season will be the last week of September, and then playoffs beginning when they normally would begin about October. Now, there is not a whole lot of dates when it comes to when the playoffs are, what the playoffs are going to look like. All we know is that there will be more teams than normal. So we're going to talk about that in a later episode, but we're just going to come back to that when we have more information. Coming up after a quick short break, we're going to go over the MLS and its return to play. So we're going to go over the groups, and I'm going to predict who I think is going to win each group. We're going to talk about FC Dallas and why they had to leave the tournament. And then we're just going to talk about Group A, and maybe there's some solution from Group B into Group A. So we're going to talk about that just coming up in a second. Thank you so much for sticking around. So now we're going to talk about the MLS return. And like I said, by the time this podcast comes out, we will be seeing a couple MLS games back and ready to go. So I believe tonight, the day I'm recording this, we're having the first game, Orlando against Miami. So if you go back, you can tell which day I recorded this. So for this section, we're just going to go over the groups, and then I'm just going to tell you who I think is going to win each group. So, Group A. Group A has 6 teams. Orlando, Miami, New York City, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Nashville. Group B, Seattle, Dallas, we'll talk about them, Vancouver, San Jose. Group C, Toronto, New England, Montreal, DC. Group D, Real Salt Lake, Sporting Kansas City, Colorado, Minnesota. Group E, Atlanta, Cincinnati, New York, and Columbus. And then Group F, LAFC, the Galaxy, Houston, and Portland. Those already, to your knowledge, I'm just going to quickly go over who I think is going to win the group, and I'll just give you a little reason why. So for Group A, I think it's going to be New York City FC. You know, Orlando, Miami, those are 2 good teams. Philadelphia, Chicago, again, very good teams. But New York has had really good luck, I think, with especially Philadelphia and Chicago. You know, Nashville's a new team, kind of up and coming. Don't think they're going to get in. But, you know, Orlando, Miami, they could do some damage to one another. And they could maybe kind of make New York kind of just slip past them. If New York can get a favorable result against both teams, I think New York wins. And, you know, I think they have the team. I don't know how they have the team to go all the way, but I think they win the group. Group B, it has to be Seattle, MLS Cup champions. The only team that could give them problems is Vancouver. But since there's 3 teams now, I think almost every single team will make it into the knockout rounds, but I could be wrong. Group C, Toronto, easily. But this group's kind of hard to look at because Toronto has had a tough time against Montreal and they've also had a hard time against DC United. I remember watching a couple games last year. DC and Wayne Rooney just destroyed them. So I think DC United could give Toronto a problem. Same thing with Montreal, but if Toronto gets by both of them, even if they can just get a draw, they'll definitely win against New England. So I honestly think that Toronto will win that group. Group D, and I'm going to go a little bit, probably what a lot of people would say no, but I say Sporting. Sporting's a really good team. I think they're kind of underrated. They have a good midfield and good defense, but I think they're kind of underrated. So I think Sporting KC will come out with that. The only tough, again, will be Real Salt Lake. And, it's going to be tough, but I think they got it. Group E, I have to go with Atlanta. They won the Eastern Conference. They were the top team in the Eastern Conference last year. And Toronto just barely beat them to get into the final. So I think Atlanta. I think, again, Columbus you don't really have a whole lot of problems with Columbus. The Red Bulls may give you some trouble, but I think Group E is Atlanta. Group F, I consider this the group of death. I'll tell you why. LAFC, that's a hard team. Very hard team. Galaxy, they've been around since I've started watching MLS, and guess what? They've always been good. They've always had a fantastic team. I remember Landon Donovan playing for them. Zlatan, it's just been so good. They've been able to just been dynamite every single year. And speaking of dynamite, we got the Houston Dynamo. Again, really good teams. And then Portland, the Timbers. I remember watching some Vancouver games, some Whitecaps game. And they've been pretty good. Maybe it's just Vancouver doesn't have their number against them, but they've been pretty good. And I've really enjoyed watching them. So with that in mind, I'll just stop that for now. And again, if you think I'm a moron or your opinion differs from me, let me know. Let us know. Honestly, get in touch with us. We'll talk about it next time. If I want to have big fan interaction in this podcast, the only way I can do that is if you guys talk about it and talk with me, because that's the only way we're going to get it done. So, moving on. FC Dallas. Now, I don't know if anybody knows. Again, hashtag COVID. It's running rampant in Texas. And FC Dallas, the MLS has asked them to remove themselves from the return to play tournament. Fantastic idea, because a lot of their players are sick. So what does this do? So the group goes down to 3. So they play 3 games they play 2 games instead of 3. Or what the MLS could say is, hey, since you only have to play twice, you have to play another team. Or you got to play another one of your opponents that way, or you could even do 4 games. But then again, it's not fair. So it's kind of hard. So I don't know what they're going to do. If it was me, I'd just leave it where it is. But I also, if maybe this would work, I don't know if it would be able to work. But I would take a team, let's say the Chicago Fire from Group A, 6-team Group A. Don't need it. Why? That doesn't make any sense. So Group A, Chicago, go over to Group B. You're in Orlando. It's not like you'd have to do any traveling. So go over to Group B. Have 5 in Group what do you call it? Group B, A. And just do that. Or you can let everyone take a W against FC Dallas. That thought just popped up into my head. So you can do that. So there's many ways the MLS can do this. I don't think they're going to do what I recommended, but hey, you know what? Sometimes I can have really stupid ideas, but that's just me. Again, if you think that's a good idea, tell me. Tell us why I'm dumb. My feelings won't get hurt. It's just sports fans chattering, and I respect the opinions of all sports fans. If you want to call me an idiot, if you want to curse at me, do it through email or any other way, but just make sure that you have some niceness around it. But it's what I would do if I was the MLS, which I'm not. So rest assured, you don't have to worry. All right, last one, guys. We can get through this. Come on, let's go. So, the NHL, the CBA right now is being handed out to players for ratification to the members, and it looks to me, judging by what I see, it looks like everything is going to be, it looks almost like a done deal. So, with that in mind, we're going to go over a couple of things about the NHL return to play, and we're just going to go over this like really important details for the CBA. So just 3 important details. We'll start with the CBA. So number 1, players, thank God, are going to be allowed to play in the 2022 and 2026 Winter Olympics. 2022 is in China. 2026, I believe, is in France. Again, if I'm wrong, tell me. But yeah, and Olympic hockey is so much better with NHL involvement. Yes, we did pretty well without them, but who wants to watch it without it? In my opinion, I think it's just fantastic with them. Plus, Canada has a much better shot at gold. I'm also German, so I cheer for Germany. And guess what? Germans are becoming a hockey nation pretty quick. You're seeing some players come out of Germany and make you think, oh, wow, Germans are going to be pretty good at hockey. You watch the World Juniors this past year, and they're going to get pretty good. So, anyways, Olympic participation, salary cap stays flat next 2 years, and escrow stays flat. I know the players, especially Artemi Panarin, went to social media and said the escrow has to come down. And so it looks like they got their way about that. So that's good. Now, the dates. We finally have news on when things will start up. It looks like the play-ins will begin August 1st. So that means that the Phase 3 and the exhibition games should start the middle of July. So training camps will start. Players will go in, have a training camp, and then they'll play a couple games in the hub cities, I believe. I could be wrong, but I believe it's in the hub cities. So that's good news. And then August 1st is when everything starts up. And then I was reading about the plans. And so 6 games total. You're going to see 6 hockey games on your TV this summer. That's going to be fantastic. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go to work. I don't know if I'll be able to pay attention to what I'm doing at work and watch the hockey games. That's going to be fantastic. So you're going to start, there'll be 3 on each hub city. So we know the hub cities are going to be Toronto and Edmonton. The NHL hasn't come out and said it yet, but the hub cities are Edmonton and Toronto. So the first game is going to be early. They're going to be real early. So it looks like it would be 12, 4, and 8. So Eastern Standard Time and Mountain Time, since Edmonton is 2 hours less, or not less, but behind the Eastern Standard Time. So that would be good. 6 games, hey, I'd take it. And another thing you have to think about too, or the other thing you have to look at, is that if the first game goes into overtime, the games, like the start of games, of the next games, are going to be pushed back. So you're going to see a lot of hockey. And you know what? I think it's even earlier than that. I don't think it's 12, 4, and 8. I think it's going to be, I think they said like 8, starting at like 8 a.m. or even maybe a little later, maybe 10. So again, if someone could clarify that for me, that'd be fantastic. But it's going to be really interesting to see 6 hockey games played on TV. Now, since you only have one, you're in one arena, it's, it's pretty good. So for me, I don't have no problem with this. Again, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, let the teams who aren't playing for the cup, let them play a little bit. Let them play a round robin tournament or like a relegation type thing where, just let them play for something, because those players who aren't playing are going to just sit and watch on TV the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's not going to be fun. And when it comes time, and unfortunately we're going to have to come back to this when the time comes in the idiotic NHL lottery entry draft, we're going to have to look at that. We're going to have to talk about that too when the time comes. But, it'll just give the players something to do It'll let them fine tune their game, improve their game, work on their game, whatever. So to me, let them play. Let them, put them in Vancouver or somewhere, or put them in, a safe American city, like let's say New York right now, or let the Americans, or let everybody, let COVID pass a little bit more, and let them just let them play hockey. Don't let them sit around and do nothing. They can practice, they can work out, yes, but it's not the same. And again, if you disagree, let me know. And if you don't, or if you agree, let me know too. I want to hear everything from everybody. I want to hear people tell me what they think. You don't have to be, you're not winning an argument. You're just saying, Brad, I disagree, and this is why I disagree. And we're going to talk about it. If there's things I feel like, I made a massive mistake, and you know what, you've changed my mind, I'll let you know. I'll say, hey, you know what, after looking at it this way, I'm going to let you know. And, I think you're right. But right now, we're just going to stop with that. That's what we're going to say for the NHL's return to play. We're going to take our last break, just a quick break, and we'll come back with some final thoughts just coming up after this. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to you all. Thank you so much for listening to our very first podcast episode. That means a lot to me and everyone else who is working on this with me. I really appreciate it. Again, don't forget to subscribe to everything on social media. We have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter feed, we have an Instagram, we have a YouTube account. You can always email us at thehometurfpodcast@gmail.com. We're going to be we're going to be following it pretty closely. So, and we'll try to get everything. We'll try to get back to everybody as soon as we can. We'll give updates on when the podcasts are coming out, how things are going. If you have any ideas, please let us know. You can always talk about sports with us. We'll always get back to you. And as soon as we get enough followers, we're going to start doing contests. We're going to have votes. We're going to have live episodes. We want to do all this stuff with you guys, but we need you to follow us on Facebook, on every single social media platform. You have to follow us. Otherwise, we're just going to it's just going to be talking about things that I want to talk about. And sometimes what I want to talk about is not what you guys want to hear. So you have to let us know what you want to hear. Let us know what I think about things. And just, we're going to have fun with it. And the only way we can is if we have your guys' support. If we have your guys follow. And it's for everybody. It's not just for guys. Ladies, if you want to follow us, go for it. If you want to let us know, I'll talk about women's hockey. I'll talk about women's softball. I'll talk about college sports, for God's sake. I'll talk about anything. If I get enough people to tell me, hey, talk about this, I will fit it into the show for you guys. And I'd like to have the first part of every show going through the fans, going through talking about things that they want to talk about, or talking about things, say, hey, Brad, you're a moron about this, and this is why. Guess what? We're going to talk about it, because I like a good back and forth, or I like a good, argument. And if some people agree with that, or some people don't agree with that, we want to get the chatter going. So right now, like I said, we're going to sign off for this episode. Again, thank you so much for listening to the Home Turf Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. I am very grateful, and I hope to hear from you guys very soon. I hope that you subscribe and listen to us every single week. This is going to be so much fun, and we're going to have a whole big just blast, I think. But again, you guys need to follow us. So thank you again for tuning in. We'll see you next time, and I hope to hear from everybody. So with that, I'll say goodbye, and have a great rest of your day or night, or whenever you're listening to it, and just hope that everything goes well for you guys. Stay safe out there with COVID. We don't want people dying from this disease. Please wear a mask. Listen to your health and safety representatives, your doctors. Listen to them. Just make sure you stay safe. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.